Have you ever looked at how the ultra-rich, the billionaires, the titans of industry, those folks with nine-figure fortunes operate, and just wondered, how on earth can I possibly do that? It often feels like they're playing an entirely different game, doesn't it?
It really does. And that's such a common question. It's more than just curiosity, I think. It's this sense that what they do is completely, out of reach.
Right.
But what's truly fascinating when you actually dig into it is that the underlying principles they use, they're surprisingly adaptable, regardless of where you are right now on the net worth scale.
Exactly. And that's really what this deep dive is all about. It's tailor-made for you, our listener. If you're sitting on, say, a few $1,000,000 in net worth, maybe you're well into the $10 million range, and you're hungry to understand how the ultra-rich structure their wealth, how they invest it, and maybe most importantly, how they protect it. Our mission today isn't just about talking theory. We want to give you a practical blueprint. We're going to show you how you might be able to adapt some of their billion-dollar tactics to your own scale, safely and effectively, of course.
Think of it as borrowing from the best, but making it work for your reality.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And we've spent, a significant amount of time digging through publicly available information. We're talking SEC filings, interviews, biographies, deep financial analysis of these big names. We've tried to pull out the core strategies, focusing on how they actually set up their financial lives. So this isn't just a summary. It's more like a behind-the-scenes look broken down into actionable insights for you.
Okay, so what can you expect from this deep dive? Well, first, we're going to unpack their unique mindset, that foundational way of thinking that really allows them to build and, crucially, preserve immense wealth.
Right, the psychology behind it.
Exactly. Then we'll move into their layered money architecture, how they build these sophisticated financial fortresses. We'll look at how they structure their companies to sort of ring fence risk, their investment philosophies, which might surprise you. Sometimes they're quite disciplined, and even the often overlooked lifestyle choices that actually compound wealth in maybe unexpected ways.
And we'll bring it all to life with real-world examples. Names you definitely know. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Oprah Winfrey, Warren Buffett, Donald Bren, big names.
Yep. And most importantly, for every strategy we discuss, we'll give you clear, actionable takeaways, things you could potentially implement right now. And we'll explain any complex financial concepts, in plain English. No jargon if we can help it.
And throughout this, expect, a lively conversation. We'll share our own insights, maybe even disagree lightly on a point or two.
Maybe.
But we'll constantly be asking, what does this mean for you, our listener? This isn't a lecture. It's not a dry textbook reading. It's more like a conversation among hopefully trusted friends and expert advisors, just exploring some really powerful wealth-building secrets.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, let's unpack this. 1-1, the ultra-rich mindset. What changes after your first few million? So let's kick things off with the mental game, because that really is where it all begins, isn't it? Yeah. What's the biggest shift you see in how the ultra-rich approach their money once they've hit that stratospheric level, once they've got their first few million, or maybe their first few 100 million?
Well, what's truly fascinating here, and it's often really counterintuitive for people who are still, aggressively building their wealth,
right,
is that the primary directive seems to shift dramatically. It goes from must win to don't lose.
Don't lose. Okay.
Now, this isn't about being pessimistic or risk averse, like, hiding money under the mattress. It's about prioritizing robust risk control above everything else. They've kind of already won the game in many ways. Now it's about defending that lead, protecting the capital.
Don't lose beats, must win. That's a really powerful distinction, because I think for a lot of entrepreneurs or even just ambitious investors, the initial impulse is always to swing for the fences, right? Yeah. Chase that next huge win. So why does this defensive approach work so well for them? And maybe why is it so hard for the rest of us to adopt that mindset?
That's a brilliant question, and you've really hit on a core psychological challenge there. For most of us, the focus is all on accumulation, finding that breakthrough investment, that home run business.
Okay.
But when you have a massive wealth base, think hundreds of millions or billions, the math of compounding changes, even modest low-risk rates become incredibly powerful.
Right, the percentages work differently on big numbers.
Exactly. A consistent low volatility return, even if it's just, say, 5% or 7% a year, compounds into staggering amounts over time. I mean, 7% on $100 million, that's $7 million a year.
Okay, yeah.
That's more than enough for anyone to live on comfortably, leaving the principal untouched to keep growing. In contrast, those swing for the fences bets. Yes, they offer potential for higher returns, but they also carry significant risk, the risk of having a fortune. And recovering from that kind of loss takes an enormous amount of time and effort. The ultra-rich understand this deeply. Preserving capital is the most efficient and, frankly, probably the least stressful path to long-term growth once you have scale. It's all about playing defense with your wealth.
And the classic example here has to be Warren Buffett.
Eh.
Everyone in life is famous rule #1, never lose money. It's almost become a cliche, but it really does capture this mindset, doesn't it? And it's not just some cute saying for him.
You're absolutely right. It's not just a catchy phrase. It's baked into Berkshire Hathaway's entire structure, their whole strategy. Well, their architecture, from the massive insurance float they generate, which we should definitely talk more about later, to the kinds of businesses they acquire, durable, resilient companies like See's Candies or the BNSF Railway. It's all designed precisely to avoid forced selling during market shocks or downturns.
Forced selling, that's key.
It is. They can weather economic storms because they don't have to liquidate assets at fire sale prices. In fact, downturns are often when they buy things. They buy distressed assets from others who are forced to sell. It's the ultimate countercyclical play.
So for you, our listener, maybe sitting on a few million, how do you adapt this don't lose mindset? What's the practical takeaway here? How do you build that resilience?
Okay, here's something very concrete. Before you make any significant investment, a new business venture, a big property purchase, even a large stock position, create a simple one-page failure plan.
A failure plan. Sounds a bit morbid.
Maybe. But it's not about predicting doom. It's about stress testing, building robust foundations. Ask yourself the tough questions. What happens if my revenue suddenly drops 40%? What if interest rates jump 300 basis points and my loan payments skyrocket?
Right.
What if my main lender pulls my line of credit unexpectedly? Or the market for my core product just vanishes overnight?
Okay, worst case scenarios.
Exactly. The goal is to consciously acquire assets that can withstand these severe scenarios without forcing you into fire sales or a liquidity crisis. You want to own things that can ride out a serious storm, maybe even for years, without breaking your financial back. This plan forces you to think it through.
That's incredibly practical. It shifts the focus from just upside potential to downside protection. Building in resilience from the start, that's a totally different way to look at risk. Okay, let's next up in these mindset shifts. Control without always direct ownership. This sounds a bit counterintuitive to me. Don't the rich want to own everything outright? Isn't direct ownership like the ultimate form of control?
Yeah, that's a really common misconception. And it points to a deeper level of financial sophistication, I think. What's fascinating is that the ultra-rich often separate the use and the benefit of an asset from its legal title.
Okay, break that down. Use and benefit versus title.
Right. It's a sophisticated move. It lets them maintain effective control, get the economic benefit, the cash flow or the appreciation, while the assets themselves sit inside companies or trusts, not directly in their personal names.
And why do that?
Well, it provides a crucial layer of protection from personal liabilities. If something goes wrong with the asset, it doesn't automatically expose their personal wealth. It also enhances privacy. And maybe most importantly, it offers tremendous flexibility for things like accessing liquidity or making strategic moves without triggering unwanted side effects.
Like big tax bills or negative market signals.
Exactly. Heavy taxation, negative signals, all of that.
So they might not have their name literally on the deed, but they still call the shots and get the profits.
Yeah.
Can you give us a concrete example? Someone high profile doing this?
Elon Musk is actually a great case study here. He has, historically pledged significant amounts of his Tesla shares as collateral for personal loans.
Right, I've read about that. That seems risky, though.
It absolutely carries risk. It's often disclosed in Tesla's own SEC filings as a potential risk for the company. Because, if the stock price tanks, a large block of pledged shares could lead to forced sales, which could then further impact the market value. It's a real concern.
So why do it?
Well, the reason he does it is to access massive amounts of liquidity, actual cash, without selling his core positions. Selling would trigger huge capital gains taxes, potentially billions, and maybe even more importantly, selling large blocks could signal a lack of confidence in his own company. That could crush market perception and investor trust.
So he gets the cash without selling, avoiding taxes and bad PR.
Precisely. He maintains control, keeps the vast majority of the ownership upside, gets the liquidity he needs, all without the negative consequences of an outright sale.
That's clever. Very clever. So for our listeners who aren't pledging billions in stock, how do they apply this principle? What's the practical takeaway for their own assets?
For you, the actionable takeaway is to systematically, deliberately place your income-generating assets or assets with high liability potential into separate LLCs, limited liability companies.
Okay, like rental properties.
Definitely rental properties. Also intellectual property, your brand, your content, patents, and of course, your operating businesses. Crucially, keep your personal name off the title of assets that carry significant liability risk.
So instead of John Smith owning the rental house, it's 123 Main Street LLC.
Exactly. And if you own multiple properties, ideally each one gets its own separate LLC. This creates a legal firewall between them and you personally.
Okay.
And then on top of that, add a robust personal umbrella insurance policy. This layered approach creates a much more comprehensive shield. It ensures that a lawsuit against one asset, say a slip and fall at one rental, doesn't spill over and jeopardize your entire personal fortune or your other assets.
So it's about creating those legal firewalls, even if it feels like a bit more paperwork up front.
I like that analogy you used before, putting each valuable item in its own fireproof safe instead of one big safe.
That's a great way to think about it. A little more effort initially, but much, much safer in the long run.
And the last piece of this mindset puzzle, play multi-decade chess. This really speaks to the long game, doesn't it? Because I think for most people, maybe even successful business owners, our timelines are often, 5 years? 10 years if we're really stretching it.
That's it, exactly. And this might be one of the most distinguishing characteristics. The ultra-rich operate on extremely long timelines. We're talking decades, sometimes even multi-generation.
Wow.
They aren't looking for quick flips. They're not obsessing over quarterly earnings reports. They're certainly not getting swayed by the latest market fad or crypto craze.
Right. Instead, they are patiently, deliberately building deep, sustainable moats around their core wealth pillars. They're creating structures and businesses designed to outlive any single market cycle, maybe even their own lifetimes. It's all about enduring value.
Building moats. I love that image. It's like they're fortifying their financial kingdom, making it incredibly difficult for competitors or market forces to just come in and undermine their core assets. And Jeff Bezos immediately comes to mind here.
He's the perfect example of playing multi-decade chess. Bezos spent decades meticulously building Amazon's formidable moats before they really started aggressively harvesting profits.
Decades? Like what?
Think about it. Their logistics network, it's unparalleled in scale and efficiency now, took forever to build. Their cloud computing dominance with AWS. AWS literally powers a huge chunk of the internet. That makes it incredibly sticky for businesses. And their subscription services like Prime, which integrate customers so deeply into the Amazon ecosystem. He built all of this infrastructure, this market dominance, for years, often at the expense of short-term profits. Wall Street wasn't always happy, but he was playing the long game. Even his personal passion projects are housed in dedicated long-term vehicles, like the Washington Post is held in MASH Holdings, an entity outside Amazon. That allows him to steward it for journalistic integrity and influence, not just quarterly returns. And his family office, Bezos Expeditions, it's designed to handle his personal investments, his moonshots like Blue Origin, all structured to endure beyond short-term market swings and chase truly generational goals. He thinks in generations, not years.
It really is like planting an oak tree, not just a beanstalk. That shift in perspective is huge. So how do our listeners who are maybe thinking about their next 5 or 10 years start to stretch that out? How do you adopt multi-decade thinking when the world feels like it's moving so fast?
It starts with clarity and maybe
That's a great framework. Be intentional about what you're truly building for the long haul, not just reacting. 2, money architecture. How fortunes are layered for protection and growth. So we've covered the foundational mindset, really important stuff. Now let's talk about the actual architecture of their money. How do the ultra-rich physically structure or layer their fortunes for maximum protection and growth? And the first, maybe most fundamental piece of this puzzle seems to be holding companies.
Holding companies are absolutely foundational. You see them everywhere once you start looking. Essentially what they do is centralize the ownership of various assets. Think of it like a parent company that owns several subsidiary companies, the children.
Okay, a parent overseeing the kids.
Right. And this setup achieves several critical things all at once. First, it simplifies capital allocation. The parent can move money strategically between its children, funding the ones that need it or have the best opportunities. Second, it powerfully isolates risk. We touched on this earlier, but it ensures a problem in one venture, one child, doesn't spill over and infect the others or the parent.
Right, the firewall idea again.
Exactly. And third, it significantly enhances privacy. By having the holding company own the assets, the individual's name might be further removed from direct ownership records.
Okay, that parent-child analogy helps visualize it.
Yeah.
So how does this play out with someone like Jeff Bezos again? How does he use holding companies in practice?
Well, Bezos uses Bezos Expeditions as his family office, which effectively acts as his personal investment hub. That's the parent entity, if you like.
Okay.
It publicly lists direct holdings in projects like that incredibly ambitious 10,000-year clock, talk about long-term thinking, and of course, Blue Origin, his aerospace company.
Right.
And his acquisition of the Washington Post is another classic example of this layering. It's held outside of Amazon under a separate entity called Nash Holdings, LLC.
Right, you mentioned that.
It's a personal, non-corporate ownership structure. It effectively ring-fences that media asset from Amazon's day-to-day operations and liabilities, means if something goes wrong at Amazon, WAPO is largely protected, and vice versa. It's a clear separation for both risk management and strategic focus.
That's a really powerful way to segment risk. It emphasizes that one part of the empire doesn't accidentally drag down another. So for our listener who's building their wealth, maybe has a business and a couple of properties, how do they create their own sort of scaled down version of this?
You can absolutely start this today, even at a smaller scale. Create what we call a parent LLC. This becomes your central hub.
My main holding company.
Exactly. This parent LLC then strategically owns your other entities. So it would own your operating company, LLC, which runs your main business. It would own separate realty LLCs, ideally one for each significant property you acquire. Don't lump them together.
Okay.
And maybe an IP LLC for your intellectual property, trademarks, content, patents, whatever applies.
Right.
The parent LLC then acts as the strategic director. It facilitates intentional capital allocation. It can move cash between its children, maybe via formal intercompany loans or dividends, allowing you to strategically deploy capital where it's most needed or where the best opportunities pop up, all while keeping those assets legally firewalled from each other. It's about building a structured, resilient financial organism.
It sounds like a lot of LOCs, but I'm starting to see the logic. Each one serves a very specific purpose and protects the others. That fireproof, safe idea again. A bit more setup, maybe some minor annual costs, but the protection and flexibility sound like they're worth it.
In almost all cases, the long-term benefits far outweigh the initial setup effort and minimal costs, especially as your net worth grows.
Next up, a really big one, trusts. We hear about trusts all the time, often in the news about, dynastic wealth, billionaire estates. But why do the ultra-rich care so much about them? And how do they actually work for someone who has significant assets but isn't, a Walton?
Trusts are absolutely fundamental. They're powerful legal structures, and the ultra-rich use them for several key reasons. First, they use trusts to bypass probate.
Probate, that's the court process after someone dies.
Exactly. It's the often lengthy, very public, and frequently expensive court process of validating a will and distributing assets. Trusts typically avoid probate entirely.
Which means?
Which means asset transfers happen privately and much more quickly. No public airing of your financial laundry. Second, they use trusts to significantly reduce estate taxes. For large fortunes, estate taxes can be cripplingly high, taking a huge chunk out of what gets passed on. Trusts can be structured to minimize that tax bite legally.
Okay, privacy and tax savings. What else?
And third, maybe most importantly for legacy, trusts allow them to establish multi-generational rules for how wealth is managed and distributed. This ensures their financial values and legacy are upheld long after they're gone. It prevents heirs from, say, squandering a fortune overnight or mismanaging key assets.
So it's not just about avoiding taxes. It's really about control and continuity across generations, making sure the wealth isn't just dissipated. Can you give us an example of this, especially for that multi-generational aspect?
Sure. You'll often see what are called revocable trusts used by the ultra-rich for flexibility during their lifetime. Revocable means the person who created it, the grantor, can change or even cancel it. It acts as a flexible planning tool while they're alive.
Okay.
But then you have irrevocable trusts, or even more complex dynasty trusts. These are much more robust. They're used for serious asset protection and very long-term estate planning. Think of those big family empires like the Waltons of Walmart fame.
Right.
Their wealth is largely held within complex trust structures designed to last for potentially hundreds of years. These trusts provide for future generations while dictating specific terms for how the wealth can be used or managed. established.
And are these details public?
Sometimes public filings might reveal the existence of a trust, but the granular details who exactly benefits, how funds are distributed, the specific assets held inside often remain private by design. That privacy is a key feature.
That level of privacy and control across generations sounds incredibly appealing. So for our listener, where do they even start with trusts? It sounds like it could get very complicated very quickly.
It can, absolutely. But you don't need to start with the most complex structure. You start simple and add layers as your wealth and needs grow. For most people with significant assets, a good starting point is a revocable living trust.
Okay, what goes in that?
You'd typically use it to hold your primary residence and maybe your main brokerage accounts. This simple step helps avoid probate for those key assets, making things much easier for your heirs.
Got it. Simple start.
Then, as your net worth grows and maybe your potential liability increases, perhaps you own more properties or a larger business, that's when you should talk to a specialized estate attorney about adding more advanced structures. Maybe an irrevocable life insurance trust, an ILA. In simple terms, this basically takes your life insurance policy and puts it in its own separate, secure legal bucket.
Why do that?
So that when the policy pays out upon your death, that money typically bypasses your taxable estate. Your heirs get the full benefit, usually tax-free, without it adding to your estate tax burden.
Okay, that sounds powerful.
Or you might consider an asset protection trust specifically designed to shield assets from potential future creditors or lawsuits. The key principle is layering protection as your wealth grows, always with expert legal guidance.
It really does sound like building blocks. You start with the foundation, the revocable trust, and add more specialized blocks as your financial fortress gets bigger.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, let's talk about multi-jurisdiction planning. Now, this really sounds like something only billionaires do, right? Setting up companies in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. Is there a scaled-down version for our listeners who are, firmly based in the U.S.?
It definitely sounds exotic, but the underlying principle is much broader. What's fascinating is how much the choice of jurisdiction, meaning the state or country whose laws govern an entity or transaction, impacts things like privacy, creditor protection, the legal system you operate under, and of course, taxation. The ultra-rich strategically leverage this. It's not always about moving money to a tropical island. Sometimes it's about choosing the best state within the U.S. for a particular purpose.
So location really does matter, legally speaking, even for just where the company's paperwork is filed or where you officially call home. Do we have a high-profile example of this playing out, maybe within the U.S.?
Absolutely. Jeff Bezos' highly publicized move of his primary residence from Washington state to Florida last year is a perfect example.
Right. I remember that. Why Florida? Just the sunshine.
Well, the sunshine probably doesn't hurt, but the big financial driver is taxes. Florida famously has no state individual income tax. Washington state, on the other hand, had recently introduced a new capital gains tax. So this move was widely analyzed for its massive potential state-level tax advantages for someone with Bezos' level of investment income and potential future stock sales. It showcases how strategic jurisdictional positioning, even at the personal residency level, is a key component of wealth preservation. It was almost certainly a multi-billion-dollar decision, not just a lifestyle choice.
That's a very practical, very U.S.-based move.
Yeah. So for our listener, what does multi-jurisdiction planning look like if they don't need a private jet to the Caymans, or maybe they don't even want to move states for tax reasons?
You absolutely don't need offshore funds to benefit from this principle. For most folks in this semi-rich category, you can legally choose favorable formation states within the U.S. for your LLCs.
Like which states and why? Delaware and Wyoming are two extremely popular choices. They're often picked for specific reasons. Delaware has a very established and sophisticated body of corporate law and a specialized business court, which can be advantageous for complex deals or if you plan to seek venture capital. Wyoming, on the other hand, is known for its enhanced privacy provisions, for example. The names of LLC members often aren't required to be publicly listed.
Oh, interesting. So privacy is a big driver for Wyoming.
Yes, and both states also have strong statutes protecting LLC members from the liabilities of the company itself, reinforcing that corporate veil. So this means your holding company, or even your main operating company, could potentially be formed in, say, Wyoming, allowing you to benefit from its favorable corporate laws and privacy features, even if your actual business operations are in California or you live in New York.
So the company's home state, on paper, can be different from where the work actually gets done.
Correct. Within legal limits and proper registration, of course.
Huh.
It gives you a robust layer of structural protection and potential privacy benefits without needing international complexity.
That's a much more accessible way to think about it. It's about being smart about where you set up your legal structures, not necessarily where you physically live or work. That's a key distinction. 3, company structure. How they ring-fence risk. So we've got the mindset, we've got the overarching architecture, holding companies, trusts, maybe some smart jurisdiction choices. Now, how do the ultra-rich structure their actual operating companies, the businesses making the money? How do they really ring-fence the risk there? Because let's face it, every business carries some level of risk.
This is absolutely critical. And it's a lesson that, frankly, far too many growing businesses learn the hard way. The ultra-rich rigorously, almost religiously, separate distinct ventures into individual legal entities.
We keep coming back to this separation idea.
Because it's that important. What it does is powerfully isolate liabilities. It means if one part of their empire, one specific company, faces a major lawsuit, a huge regulatory fine, or some catastrophic financial challenge, the assets held in another legally separate venture are generally protected from claims against the first one.
Protects the other parts of the kingdom.
Exactly. It also significantly simplifies things like bringing in investors. Each venture has its own clean structure, its own clear financials, making it much easier for investors to understand exactly what they're putting money into.
So it's literally about building these impenetrable legal walls between different businesses or even different types of assets within a business. Who really illustrates this concept best, especially someone with a really diverse empire?
Elon Musk's empire is probably the prime illustration of this principle in action today. Think about it. Tesla, SpaceX, X Corp, what used to be Twitter, Neuralink, they all operate as entirely distinct legal entities.
Right. They seem totally separate.
They are. They have their own boards, often very different investor bases, public shareholders for Tesla, government contracts, and VC for SpaceX, deep tech investors for Neuralink, and crucially, their own separate liabilities.
So if, hypothetically, Neuralink faced some massive lawsuit related to its brain-computer interface,
it wouldn't, in theory, directly bankrupt Tesla or SpaceX because they are legally separate entities with their own assets and obligations. Even for that incredibly complex Twitter acquisition, he didn't just buy it directly. He used a bespoke stack of newly created X Holdings entities in the merger agreements.
would do that.
That sophisticated scaffolding allowed for a clear separation of liabilities, integrated different funding sources smoothly, and ultimately consolidated control under a new private parent structure, keeping it firewalled from his other major ventures. It's all about containing the blast radius if something goes wrong.
That's a powerful, real-world example, especially given how much news those companies generate. So for our listeners, what's the actionable takeaway here? How do they implement this kind of entity separation in their own businesses and holdings, even if they only have, say, one main business and a side hustle?
Okay, the big takeaway is avoid the common and, frankly, quite dangerous mistake of bundling different types of assets or distinct business lines into a single LLC just to save a few $100s on filing fees.
What kind of bundling do you mean?
Like, never house your main e-commerce brand, your separate consulting practice, and your first rental duplex all within the same single LLC. I see people do this all the time when they're starting out.
Seems easier, maybe.
It seems easier up front, but it's a liability nightmare waiting to happen. Instead, give each distinct business line and each significant property its own distinct legal bucket or entity.
So one LLC for the e-com, one for consulting, one for the duplex.
Ideally, yes. It might seem like more paperwork initially, and yes, there are some minor ongoing costs for annual reports and things like that, but trust me, it is far, far easier to manage and, more importantly, exponentially safer in the long run than trying to untangle a commingled mess if a lawsuit ever hits one part of your operation. The potential cost of commingling assets absolutely dwarfs the perceived savings of using just one LLC.
That makes so much sense. One problem in one area shouldn't be allowed to jeopardize everything else you've worked so hard to build. It's about protecting the overall fortune, piece by piece.
Okay, building on that entity separation idea, let's talk about parent-subsidiary models. This sounds like a classic corporate structure, but how do the ultra-rich use it specifically for wealth building and protection? And who's really the king of this strategy?
You're right, it is a classic corporate structure, but Warren Buffett has arguably perfected its use for wealth management and, crucially, for capital allocation across a diverse empire.
Okay.
The structure involves a central parent company, in his case, Berkshire Hathaway, owning multiple, usually fully controlled subsidiary companies. The genius of it is how it allows for highly decentralized operations.
Meaning the subsidiaries run themselves day to day. Exactly. Individual businesses operate with a high degree of autonomy, but critical capital allocation decisions remain highly centralized at the parent level. This optimizes how resources are deployed across the entire portfolio. It really aims for the best of both worlds. Operational freedom for the experts running the businesses, combined with strategic financial control from the top.
Freedom to operate, but central control over the money. That does sound like a powerful combination. How does Berkshire Hathaway really exemplify this in practice?
Well, Berkshire Hathaway is the textbook case. It owns dozens of incredibly diverse subsidiaries: BNSF Railway, Geico Insurance, See's Candies, Dairy Queen, Duracell Batteries, you name it.
All sorts of stuff.
And these businesses largely operate with what Buffett calls radical autonomy. The management teams on the ground run their day-to-day operations with very little interference from Berkshire headquarters in Omaha.
So Buffett isn't telling Geico how to sell insurance.
Not at all. However, the critical capital allocation decisions, where to invest the excess cash generated by these businesses, which new businesses to acquire, or which ones to potentially divest those decisions, are made centrally at the Berkshire level by Buffett and his key team.
Okay.
And a key part of their strategy, as we hinted at earlier, involves their insurance businesses. They are classic examples of this model. They generate what Buffett famously calls float.
Right, the float. Explain that again simply.
Think about it like this. When you pay your car insurance premium, you pay up front, right? The insurance company collects that money before they might have to pay out any claims related to your policy. Sometimes they never have to pay out on your specific policy.
Heck yeah.
That pool of money they're holding the premiums collected but not yet paid out in claims is the float. It's essentially like having a giant interest-free loan from millions of customers.
Wow, an interest-free loan.
Exactly. And Buffett can take this float, this massive pool of capital that doesn't cost him anything, and invest it long-term in stocks, bonds, or buying whole companies, supercharging Berkshire Hathaway's growth without having to borrow from traditional banks at market interest rates. It's genius.
That float is such a powerful concept. It really is like getting free money to invest. So for our listener, how do they create their own, maybe much smaller version of a parent subsidiary model? How does this apply to them?
Make your holding LLC, that parent company we discussed earlier, the strategic capital allocator for your own growing group of assets or businesses.
Okay, the holdco is the HQ.
Right. Allow each of your operating companies, your opcos, whether it's that e-commerce brand, the consulting practice, maybe a specific product line you've spun off, allow them to run lean, each with its own clear profit and loss P&L statement.
So you know exactly how each one is doing financially.
Precisely. This gives you clear visibility into the performance and profitability of each individual venture. Your parent entity, the holdco, then makes the strategic decisions. Do we invest more in this opco? Do we try to sell that one? Do we hold steady? And crucially, the holdco allocates cash generated across the group to the ventures that show the best risk-adjusted returns or the most strategic potential.
So money earned by, say, the consulting business could be used to fund growth in the e-commerce business if that looks like the better bet.
Exactly. It's about being the strategic conductor of your own growing financial orchestra. You deploy resources intentionally where they'll have the most impact on building overall wealth, not just letting cash pile up wherever it happens to be generated.
It's about intentional resource deployment, even on a smaller scale. Not just throwing money everywhere, but deciding where it will grow your wealth most efficiently. That's a shift. And finally, under this company structure section, we have licensing and IP boxes. This sounds very sophisticated, like something maybe only a huge global brand would need to worry about, not necessarily a smaller, growing business owner. Is that right?
It does sound sophisticated, but it's incredibly effective. And actually, the principle is applicable at much smaller scales than people often realize. The ultra-rich strategically place their valuable intellectual property, things like trademarks, copyrights, patents, even unique content libraries or software code, into dedicated legal entities. These are often called IP LLCs or sometimes IP boxes.
Okay, a separate company just for the ideas.
Essentially, yes. They then formally license these assets back to their main operating businesses, usually for a fee or royalty.
Why go through that extra step? Why not just have the operating business own its own brand or patent?
Because this structure critically separates the crown jewels, your most valuable intangible assets, the things that make your business unique, from the operational risk of your day-to-day business activities.
So the brand name itself or the secret sauce recipe or the software code, is protected in its own little legal vault, separate from the risks of actually selling the product or service.
Exactly. It's legally distinct from the daily grind, the potential lawsuits from customers, employees, or suppliers that the operating business might face. Who does this really well, and how does it play out in the real world?
Oprah Winfrey is an absolute master of this strategy. Her brand is her business in many ways.
Right.
She meticulously keeps her trademarks, the name Oprah, the O logo, and her valuable publicity rights within Harpo-controlled entities like Harpo Inc. and OW Licensing.
So Harpo owns the brand.
Yes. She then licenses her iconic brands to various operating partners and ventures, whether it was her magazine, her production company, her TV network, OWN.
And they are known to be very active in defending those trademarks. Past lawsuits over the use of her name or likeness clearly demonstrate how aggressively her companies protect and monetize this core intellectual property. It's not just about creating the brand, it's about legally owning it, controlling it, defending its value, and ensuring its ownership is insulated from any liabilities of the businesses that use the brand day to day.
So if one of those operating partners, say the magazine publisher, faced a huge lawsuit,
Oprah's core brand IP, owned by Harpo, would remain safe, legally separate from that operational liability.
she's not just the face. She's the strategic owner of the underlying value, protected separately. That's a huge distinction. So for our listener, how do they create their own IP fortress? Especially if their business relies heavily on their unique brand, their content, or maybe a specific technology they've developed.
If your business has a recognizable brand name, a distinctive logo, maybe proprietary software you've coded, unique course materials or content you've created, or even a patented product, this strategy applies directly to you.
What's the first step?
Register your brand formally with trademarks, protect your content with copyrights, secure patents if applicable, then place the ownership of these registered assets into a separate IP LLC. Okay, the IP box. Right. Then, and this is a crucial step, many people formally license these assets back to your main operating company, your OpCo, for a fee or royalty. You need a written licensing agreement between the two LLCs.
Why is that agreement so important?
It demonstrates the legal separation and the arm's length transaction. So if your OpCo ever faces a major lawsuit, maybe from a disgruntled customer, an operational screw-up, an employee dispute your invaluable intellectual property, your brand, your content, your patents, they are safeguarded in that distinct IP LLC, potentially beyond the reach of the Optra's operational liabilities.
So even if the operating business goes under,
Your brand and its underlying value are still yours, protected in the IP LLC, and potentially available to license to a new venture or even sell separately. It preserves the core value you created.
that's such a smart move. It ensures your most valuable creations, the intangible stuff, are insulated from the unpredictable risks of just doing business day to day. For how they actually invest. Purpose-built portfolios. All right, let's shift gears now. We've talked structure. Now let's talk about how these titans actually invest their money. Because it's pretty clear, it's not just a random grab bag of stocks and bonds, right? They seem to have these very purpose-built portfolios, almost like highly specialized machines designed for different jobs.
That's exactly right. They typically construct their portfolios not as one single block of money, but with distinct sleeves or segments. Each sleeve serves a very specific purpose within the overall strategy.
Okay, like different tools for different tasks.
Precisely. And the bedrock, the foundation, is what we can call the core portfolio. This part focuses relentlessly on long-term preservation of capital and generating consistent, reliable cash flow.
Preservation and cash flow. Sounds conservative.
It generally is. This is often achieved by owning scarce, high-quality assets, think prime real estate, stable businesses, maybe blue-chip dividend stocks, and holding them for decades, riding out the short-term market fluctuations. This conservative, low-turnover strategy aims to generate reliable net operating income, NOI, and steady long-term appreciation. It creates an incredibly stable foundation for the rest of the portfolio.
Sleep well assets, as some people call them. The kind of investment that doesn't keep you tossing and turning at night. Who is the ultimate example of this long-term core asset strategy, maybe particularly in real estate?
Donald Brennan and the Irvine Company are arguably the purest, almost mythical example of this philosophy in action. They are famous for owning trophy-grade real estate, primarily in Southern California, and holding it seemingly forever.
Not flipping properties then.
Absolutely not. Their portfolio is enormous, hundreds of office buildings, over 125 large apartment communities, more than 40 retail centers, and nearly all of it is held for the ultra-long term. They are constantly compounding wealth through stability, meticulous management, and consistent rental income. They're not focused on selling, they're focused on building, improving, and managing these prime assets for ongoing, reliable cash flow. It's a testament to extreme patience and focus on quality.
That's incredible patience. It really is multi-decade chess played out with physical buildings. So for our listener, what does building a core portfolio look like at their scale, whether it's real estate or other types of assets?
You want to prioritize those sleep well assets that generate consistent income and have intrinsic value that tends to hold up or appreciate over long periods. In real estate, maybe aim for Class A or high-quality Class B rental properties, ideally located in supply-constrained submarkets.
Supply-constrained, meaning it's hard to build new stuff there.
Exactly. Areas where zoning is tough, land is scarce, so demand consistently tends to outstrip supply over time. That supports rental rates and property values. You might also look for triple net leases with strong, stable tenants.
Triple net, that's where the tenant pays most of the expenses, right?
Right. The tenant pays property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which significantly reduces your burden and makes the income stream more predictable. Outside of real estate, you might consider dividend aristocrats in the stock market.
Dividend aristocrats, like royalty.
Sort of. These are companies, typically large, stable blue chips that have a long, proven history, usually 25 years or more, of consistently increasing their dividends year after year. That signals strong financial health and a commitment to returning value to shareholders. The idea is to build your core on assets designed for long-term stability and reliable income, providing that cash flow you can count on, even when other parts of the market are going crazy.
Okay, so once that stable core is in place, generating cash flow, they don't just stop there, right? They also seem to have this opportunity or growth sleeve in their portfolios. How does that fit into the overall picture?
Right. On top of that stable core foundation, the ultra-rich typically allocate a smaller, carefully defined portion of their wealth to higher growth, potentially higher risk opportunities. This is where they aim for significant upside potential.
How do they usually access these opportunities?
Often through direct investments in private companies, maybe startups or growth stage businesses, or through investing in venture capital, VC funds or private equity PE funds, which specialize in these types of investments.
So this is where they take more risk.
Yes, this sleeve is where they pursue those potentially outsized returns, but it's a calculated bet, not a wild gamble, because it's only a portion of their total wealth. The potential loss of this entire sleeve, while obviously impactful, wouldn't cripple their entire financial structure because the core is protected.
It's like their moonshot fund, maybe, but still managed very strategically. And Jeff Bezos, with Bezos Expeditions, seems to fit this perfectly again.
He absolutely does. Bezos Expeditions, his family office, clearly serves this exact purpose alongside managing his core wealth. It publicly lists direct investments and VC-style investments in companies like Airbnb before it went public, or Anduril, which is a cutting-edge defense technology company.
Right, those are private, high-growth companies.
Exactly. These represent a private equity and venture capital mindset layered onto that foundation of stable, established wealth from Amazon stock. It's where he can take more calculated risks on innovative ideas that have the potential for exponential growth. He understands that some, maybe even many, will fail, but the few big successes could potentially pay for all the losses and then some, generating significant alpha.
So for our listener, how do they create their own growth sleeve? They probably don't have $1 billion lying around to put into a top-tier Silicon Valley VC fund.
No, probably not. But you can apply the principle. Dedicate a specific capped portion of your investable net worth, maybe somewhere between 5% and 15%, depending on your risk tolerance and overall situation, to this growth sleeve.
And what kind of opportunities fit here for someone at the semi-rich level?
You could consider things like investing in search funds. That's where you provide capital to talented entrepreneurs who are specifically looking to acquire and then operate an existing small profitable business. Or you might look at taking minority stakes in established, boring but cash-generating private businesses, maybe ones you understand well or have a connection to through your network.
Investing in what you know.
Exactly. If you have strong expertise and a good network in a particular industry, you could even build a small angel investor portfolio, making direct investments in early stage startups within your specific circle of competence where you can not only provide capital, but also potentially add value through advice or connections. The absolute key, though, is to keep this portion capped and well-defined. It's money you should be mentally prepared to potentially lose entirely if things go sideways, but which offers significant upside if things go well. That way, even if this sleeve goes to zero, your core wealth, your foundation, remains intact.
It's about being really strategic with that risk allocation, understanding the role of each part of your portfolio, and not letting the tail wag the dog, so to speak.
Then we have the passion, or strategic assets. This is the fun stuff, right? The things that aren't necessarily bought purely for financial return, like the private jets, the sports teams, the fancy art collections. What role did these play in a billionaire's overall wealth strategy?
Precisely. These assets, you name some good examples. Sports teams, fine art, maybe iconic properties, super yachts, they often serve purposes beyond just pure financial return. While some might appreciate in value, sometimes significantly.
Like art or sports teams have recently. Right. But their primary purpose usually isn't the direct financial ROI you demand from a traditional investment like a stock or a rental property. Instead, they can provide other kinds of value, like unparalleled access to exclusive networks. Think about who you meet in the owner's box at an NFL game.
Right.
They can enhance personal branding and influence. Owning a well-known asset definitely gets you noticed. Or they can facilitate unique partnerships or business opportunities. They're often, yes, lifestyle choices, but choices that can indirectly contribute back to wealth building through these expanded networks or influence.
So that giant super yacht isn't just a massively expensive toy. It might actually be a floating networking venue or a very public statement piece. It sounds like a costly way to do business, though.
It certainly can be. Exactly. Jeff Bezos' Kourou super yacht, for example, made huge headlines. It's a very public signal of immense status and achievement. It's a conversation starter, potentially a venue for very high-level private meetings, and a symbol of his place in the world, completely separate from its direct financial return, which is likely negative when you factor in running costs.
Okay.
These assets are often lifestyle choices that indirectly contribute to wealth through these softer benefits networks, influence, maybe even just personal enjoyment and psychological well-being, which shouldn't be underestimated. But they're often part of a broader strategy, not just purely frivolous spending.
So for our listeners who might be eyeing, a luxury collector car or starting a small collection of vintage watches or maybe buying a piece of art they love, how should they approach these passion assets strategically rather than just viewing them as a splurge?
If you're considering collecting or acquiring passion assets, try to do so in categories that have deep, established resale markets. Think about things like vintage watches from reputable brands, blue-chip art from recognized artists, or maybe certain classic cars that have a proven history of holding or even increasing in value over time. Avoid categories that are purely speculative or just tend to depreciate rapidly.
Okay, focus on quality and established markets.
Right. And treat this as a small, discretionary percentage of your total net worth. Ideally less than 5%. This is not your retirement fund. This is play money, in a sense, albeit potentially valuable play money.
Got it. Less than 5%.
And crucially, track its fair market value annually, just like you would any other asset on your balance sheet. Be realistic. This isn't your core investment strategy. It's a discretionary allocation that might also bring enjoyment or some strategic side benefits and might hold its value or appreciate, but it shouldn't be relied upon as the primary driver of your wealth growth.
It's about being realistic, understanding its specific role in your overall wealth picture. It's a luxury, yes, but hopefully a thoughtfully acquired one with some potential lasting value, even if it's just enjoyment.
Yeah.
And finally, under the investment umbrella, we have tax-efficient wrappers and moves. Okay, this is where things can sometimes get a bit technical, but it's so incredibly important, isn't it? This seems to be where fortunes are really preserved from leaking away unnecessarily.
It's absolutely crucial. And you're right, this is where fortunes are often quietly but significantly preserved over the long term. The ultra-rich, guided by top advisors, meticulously employ legal tax strategies to defer, reduce, or in some cases even eliminate capital gains taxes and other taxes.
Now, just to be clear, this isn't about illegal tax evasion, right?
Not at all. This is about smart structuring and leveraging the existing tax code as it's written, as intended by lawmakers, often to incentivize certain behaviors like long-term investment or small business creation. It's about keeping more of what you legitimately earn compounding for you, rather than sending it off to the government sooner than necessary.
Okay, let's try to break down some of these tools into plain English, because the names themselves can sound intimidating. First up, QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. What is that, and why is it potentially so powerful, especially for entrepreneurs?
QSBS, or Qualified Small Business Stock, Section 1202 of the Tax Code, is an incredible and often surprisingly overlooked provision. It's specifically aimed at encouraging investment in small, growing businesses. In a nutshell, it allows for potentially up to a 100% exclusion on federal capital gains taxes from the sale of qualifying C corporation stock, provided you held that stock for more than 5 years.
A 100% exclusion, so zero tax on the gain.
Potentially, yes, up to certain limits. If you start a new business and structure it as a C corporation from the beginning, and it meets certain criteria like having less than $50 million in gross assets when the stock is issued and being in an active qualified trade or business, you could potentially sell that stock after holding it for 5 years and pay zero federal capital gains tax on a significant portion of your profit.
How much profit?
The exclusion is generally capped at the greater of $10 million, or 10 times your original investment basis in the stock.
Wow. That's potentially a huge tax saving for founders or early investors. Think of the difference that makes on a big exit.
It's a phenomenal incentive for starting and growing small businesses and a massive potential tax saving. But you have to plan for it from day one.
Okay, good tip. What about 1031 exchanges? We hear that term thrown around a lot in real estate circles. How does that work?
The 1031 exchange, named after Section 131 of the Tax Code, is a long-standing provision specifically for real estate investors. It allows you to defer paying capital gains taxes when you sell an investment property if you reinvest the proceeds into purchasing another like-kind investment property within very strict timelines.
Like-kind meaning another rental property for a rental property.
Generally, yes. It needs to be property held for investment or productive use in a trade or business. So you could sell an apartment building and buy an office building, or raw land, for example. The key is you have only 45 days from the date you sell your first property to formally identify potential replacement properties, and then you have a total of 180 days from the sale date to actually close on the purchase of one or more of those identified properties.
Strict timelines.
Very strict. But if you meet the rules, instead of paying taxes on the capital gain you made from selling your first property, you essentially roll that gain forward into the new, typically larger or better property. You can keep doing this exchange after exchange, deferring those taxes potentially for your entire life.
So you can keep growing your real estate portfolio significantly faster without getting hit by taxes at each sale. That sounds like a game changer for compounding wealth in real estate.
It absolutely is. And eventually, if you pass away still holding the property, your heirs typically receive what's called a step-up in basis to the fair market value at the time of your death, which can potentially eliminate all those deferred capital gains taxes entirely.
Wow. Okay. And then opportunity zones. That's a newer one, right? What are those all about?
Opportunity zones, or OZs, are a newer tax incentive created as part of the 2017 tax reforms. They provide potentially significant tax benefits, including both deferral and potential reduction, or even elimination of capital gains taxes for investments made through special vehicles called Qualified Opportunity Funds, QOFs, into designated low-income census tracts across the country.
So it's designed to encourage investment in underserved areas.
Exactly. That's the policy goal. The key benefit for an investor is that you can take capital gains you've realized from a previous investment, say from selling stock or a business or even crypto, and if you reinvest those gains into a QOF within 180 days, you can defer paying tax on those original gains until potentially the end of 2026.
Okay, deferral's good. Any other benefits?
Yes. If you hold the QOF investment for at least 5 years before that deferral date, you might get a small reduction in the amount of the original gain you eventually paid tax on. But the biggest potential benefit comes if you hold the QOF investment for at least 10 years.
10 years. Then what?
If you hold the QOF investment for 10 years, any new capital appreciation on the QOF investment itself can potentially be entirely tax-free when you eventually sell it.
So you defer the original gain, and the gain on the new investment could be tax-free.
Potentially, yes. It's a way to reinvest gains, get a fresh start tax-wise on the new investment, and potentially contribute to economic development in struggling communities at the same time. It's complex, with lots of rules, but potentially very powerful.
These all sound like really sophisticated tools that definitely require careful planning and good advice. What's the actionable takeaway for our listener? How can they start leveraging these without needing to become a tax expert themselves?
The biggest takeaway is, don't leave money on the table by ignoring these possibilities. Be proactive. If you're forming a new venture that you think might eventually be sold for a significant gain, evaluate QSBS applicability with your CPA and attorney right from the outset. Structure it correctly from day one. You usually can't fix it later.
Okay, plan ahead for QSBS.
Similarly, if you own investment real estate and are even thinking about selling a property, start planning for a potential 1031 exchange well before you even list it for sale. You need time to understand the rules, line up potential replacement properties, and engage a qualified intermediary. Those deadlines sneak up fast.
Plan ahead for 1031 too.
Absolutely. Proactive tax planning, ideally with a specialized CPA who routinely works with clients wealthier and more complex than yourself, is essential here. Tax strategy shouldn't be an afterthought you consider just before filing your return. It needs to be integrated into your investment and business strategy from day one to give you the best chance to legally keep more of your hard-earned money working for you.
So basically, always be thinking about the exit strategy and the tax implications before you even make the investment or start the business. That's a fundamental shift for how many people approach things.
It really is. It's moving from reactive to proactive wealth management. 5. Risk management. Quietly, where fortunes are saved.
We've talked a lot about growing wealth, building these structures, making smart investments, but protecting that wealth is just as critical, maybe even more so, especially for the ultra-rich.
Yeah.
This next section is all about risk management, maybe the less glamorous side, but arguably where fortunes are quietly saved. Let's start with geographic and legal diversification. Now, this sounds, again, like maybe moving your money to Switzerland, but what does it really mean at a fundamental level?
Yeah, it's not necessarily about secret Swiss bank accounts, though that might be part of it for some at the extreme end. More fundamentally, what's truly fascinating is how the ultra-rich meticulously avoid having all their eggs in one single legal or geographic basket. Meaning, they deliberately spread out their points of vulnerability. They structure their affairs, their companies, their trusts, where they bank, sometimes even where they reside, so that no single court system, no single regulator, no single bank, or even no single city or country can unilaterally control their entire destiny or potentially seize all their assets in one fell swoop.
So it's about building in redundancy, making sure a disaster in one place doesn't wipe them out completely.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that a legal problem, a political upheaval, or an economic crisis in one jurisdiction doesn't cascade into a total loss across their entire portfolio. They want resilience against systemic shocks tied to one location or legal system.
So they don't want to be entirely beholden to just one set of laws or one government's whims. We talked about Tesla's move earlier, reincorporating from Delaware to Texas. That seems like a very public example of this kind of legal diversification, doesn't it?
It is, and it perfectly illustrates the point within a U.S. context. Tesla's decision to push for reincorporation from Delaware to Texas, especially after that Delaware court ruling, voided Elon Musk's massive 2018 pay package. That wasn't just a casual move or about state taxes in that case.
What was it about then?
It illustrates precisely how jurisdiction choices are used strategically to align with long-term plans and perceived risk profiles. Delaware courts, while very sophisticated in corporate law, are also known for being quite protective of shareholder rights, sometimes leading to decisions founders don't like. Texas, on the other hand, is generally seen as having a legal environment potentially more favorable or predictable for large corporations and controlling founders.
So it wasn't necessarily about running from the Delaware ruling, but choosing a legal playground they felt was better suited for their future.
Arguably, yes. It was about choosing the legal ground they believe offers the most favorable and stable environment for their complex, large-scale operations, especially perhaps for a founder who wants to ensure maximum long-term control and minimize certain types of shareholder litigation risk. They are actively managing their legal risk by choosing their jurisdiction.
That makes perfect sense. They're optimizing their legal environment just like they optimize their tax strategies or their investment portfolios. It's another lever to pull. Okay. Next up in risk management, their insurance stack. Now, most of us have, car insurance, maybe homeowners or renters insurance, maybe some life insurance. But the way the ultra-rich approach insurance sounds like it's on a whole different level. What does an insurance stack typically entail for them?
It really is a different level. Beyond those standard policies that most people have, the wealthy employ a layered insurance stack that's designed to provide protection against almost every conceivable catastrophic financial risk.
Layered? Like what kind of layers?
Well, the foundation might be standard auto and homeowners policies, but with very high liability limits. Then, sitting on top of those is usually an incredibly robust personal umbrella liability policy.
Umbrella policy, I've heard of those.
Right, but theirs provide millions, sometimes tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions of dollars in additional liability coverage above and beyond the limits of their underlying car or home policies. These are absolutely crucial if you're ever sued personally for a significant amount, say, from a major car accident you cause or an incident at one of your properties.
Okay, massive liability protection. What else is in the stack?
They also often utilize key person insurance, especially for critical owner-operators of their businesses. This is life insurance or disability insurance taken out by the company on a vital individual. It ensures the business has the financial resources to survive, recruit a replacement, or manage debt if that key person is unexpectedly lost due to death or disability.
So insurance on the people running the show.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, specialized coverage for their valuable or unique assets. Think extensive policies for large art collections, private jets, yachts, multiple homes, maybe even kidnap and ransom insurance depending on their profile and where they travel.
Wow. They really try to insure against almost everything. What's the primary goal of having such a comprehensive and probably expensive insurance strategy? Is it just paranoia?
Maybe a little healthy paranoia.
Yeah.
But the primary goal is to provide robust protection against those unlikely but potentially catastrophic tail risks.
Tail risks? Like black swan events.
Exactly. Those low probability, high impact events, the massive personal injury lawsuit that could wipe out your entire net worth, the devastating natural disaster that destroys a valuable uninsured asset, the unexpected death of a key founder that cripples the main family business. These are the risks that, if they actually happen and you're not prepared, could completely devastate a fortune, even one that seems large and diversified.
So the insurance stack is really about mitigating those knockout blows.
Precisely. It's about sleeping soundly at night, knowing that the truly financially devastating risks, the ones that could force you to liquidate everything, are mitigated by robust insurance coverage. It's essentially a financial fail-safe for the truly unexpected catastrophes.
It's like a comprehensive financial seatbelt and airbag system. Makes sense when you have that much to protect. And finally, under risk management, how do the ultra-rich approach prudent leverage? Because we often hear stories, sometimes cautionary tales, about the rich using debt, OPM other people's money, but maybe not always how they use it strategically. I think a lot of people misunderstand the type of debt they typically prefer.
You're absolutely right. They definitely use debt. Leverage can be a powerful tool for amplifying returns, but the way they use it is often fundamentally different from how, say, the average consumer uses credit cards, or even sometimes mortgages.
How so? What's the difference?
When the ultra-rich employ leverage strategically, it's typically amortizing fixed-rate debt secured against their core income-generating assets. Let's break that down.
Okay. Amortizing.
Amortizing means the loan principal is gradually paid down over the life of the loan through regular payments. You're actually reducing the debt balance over time, not just paying interest forever.
Got it. Fixed rate.
Fixed rate means the interest rate is locked in for the term of the loan, or at least for a very long period. It won't suddenly jump up if market rates change, providing predictability and stability in their expenses.
Okay, so predictable payments that actually pay down the debt. What about security?
And it's usually secured against those core income-generating assets we talked about earlier, like a stable commercial property portfolio or a profitable operating business that throws off enough cash flow to easily cover the debt service payments.
Makes sense. What kind of debt do they tend to avoid?
They treat recourse debt with immense respect, often trying to avoid it if possible.
Recourse debt. What's that?
That's debt where the lender can come after your personal assets, beyond just the collateral pledged for the loan if you default. They understand that recourse debt creates significant personal financial exposure and try to limit it, preferring non-recourse loans where the lender's only remedy is to take back the specific asset securing the loan.
So they try to keep the risk contained to the asset itself.
Exactly. It's all about using debt as a calculated tool to potentially magnify returns on stable, income-producing assets, not using it as a financial crutch for overspending or overextending themselves on non-productive things.
So not all debt is created equal in their eyes. Can you give us an example of how this plays out, maybe contrasting prudent leverage with potentially bad debt?
Well, think back to the Elon Musk example, again, pledging his Tesla shares for personal loans. While it provides him liquidity, it also highlights the risks of using highly concentrated, potentially volatile collateral. A sharp drop in Tesla's stock price could trigger a margin call, forcing him to sell shares at the worst possible time, potentially creating a downward spiral. That underscores why even when the ultra-rich use leverage, especially against concentrated positions, it needs to be managed extremely carefully, with conservative loan-to-value ratios to avoid forced liquidation.
Right, that's high-stakes borrowing.
Now, contrast that with, say, a family using a variable-rate home equity line of credit, HELOC, to finance a lavish vacation or buy a boat. That's often non-amortizing debt, interest-only payments. The interest rate can shoot up unexpectedly, and it's secured by their primary residence, but used for consumption, not for acquiring an income-generating asset. That's generally the opposite of how the ultra-rich tend to use leverage strategically.
So for the wealthy, debt is primarily a tool, not a crutch. And it's used with extreme caution, preferably fixed rate, amortizing, non-recourse, and secured by assets that can actually pay the debt back from their own cash flow, used primarily for productive purposes.
That sums it up perfectly. Prudent is the key word. 6, lifestyle choices that compound wealth.
This is a really fascinating section, I think, because it's not just about the direct financial stuff, the structures, the investments, the risk management. It's also about how certain lifestyle choices the ultra-rich make can actually help them compound their wealth, often in subtle, indirect ways. Let's start with something called deal flow ecosystems. What on earth does that mean?
Yeah, it sounds a bit jargony, but it's a subtle yet incredibly powerful point. The ultra-rich consciously, deliberately invest in access. They pay sometimes significant amounts to be in the rooms, physically or virtually, where private exclusive deals and opportunities are discussed and originated.
So it's not just about reading the Wall Street Journal.
Not at all. This goes way beyond public information. It's about positioning themselves to connect directly with other high net worth individuals, with influential decision makers, with top fund managers, and getting early access to investment opportunities, private equity deals, venture capital rounds, unique real estate projects that the general public will simply never even hear about.
So they're paying for the conversation, not just the information. It's about being part of that inner circle where opportunities actually get created long before they hit the open market. It sounds like buying a VIP pass to the investment world.
That's a great analogy, a VIP pass. They understand that a single conversation, maybe at the right charity gala, the right private equity conference, or even just the right exclusive golf club, could potentially lead to a deal worth millions or even billions. It's a direct investment in their personal and professional ecosystem that can pay exponential dividends down the road.
How does this investment manifest itself? Are they just joining expensive clubs?
It can take many forms. Yes, it might involve paying hefty dues for an exclusive social or business club known for its influential members. It could mean investing a significant sum in a private equity or venture capital fund where part of the benefit isn't just the potential financial return, but the invitation to the fund's annual investor meetings where you network with other sophisticated LPs, limited partners, and the fund managers themselves. They might join specific industry masterminds or CEO peer groups. The key is the value often lies as much in the people you meet and the insights you gain as it does in the direct financial return of that specific membership or investment. They are buying access to deal flow.
Okay, next up, strategic philanthropy. Now, this goes way beyond just writing an occasional check to a favorite charity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because we see the headlines about these massive multi-billion-dollar donations, but it feels like there's often more to it than just pure altruism.
It absolutely does in many cases. Philanthropy for the ultra-rich often isn't just about charity in the traditional sense. It's frequently a deeply strategic endeavor as well. Large commitments, often made through dedicated private foundations or donor-advised funds, serve multiple purposes.
Like what?
Well, first, they undoubtedly create significant positive impact in areas the donor cares about, and that desire to give back is often very genuine. But second, these large-scale philanthropic initiatives also serve as incredibly powerful networking platforms and mission vehicles.
How do they work as networking platforms?
Committing serious resources to a cause, say, climate change, medical research, or education reform, puts you at the table with other major donors, with top experts in the field, with influential policymakers, and with leaders of major nonprofits. It dramatically expands your network and sphere of influence in potentially meaningful ways. It also significantly enhances public image and personal brand.
Right. Being known as a major philanthropist certainly doesn't hurt your reputation.
Exactly. It's a way to align their values with their wealth and power, projecting a certain image while also making real connections and potentially shaping agendas in fields they care about.
So it's a way to genuinely give back, hopefully make a difference, while also strategically building influence and connections.
Yeah.
The Bezos Earth Fund you mentioned earlier seems like a prime example of this scale.
It is. The Bezos Earth Fund, which is a massive $10 billion commitment aimed at combating climate change, or his Day One Fund focusing on homelessness and early childhood education. These are perfect examples. They are undoubtedly designed to have a huge impact on those critical issues, but they also serve as powerful platforms for Bezos himself. They bring him into direct contact with global leaders, top scientists, other major philanthropists, and key policymakers involved in those areas. These initiatives open doors, build relationships, and allow him to help shape conversations on a global scale, all while pursuing causes he presumably cares deeply about.
It's a fascinating intersection of doing good and doing well, strategically speaking, aligning values with wealth building and influence building simultaneously. And finally, under lifestyle choices, something that I think we can all learn from, regardless of our current net worth, hiring A-player advisors. This seems like a non-negotiable for the super successful.
It absolutely is non-negotiable at the highest levels. The ultra-rich don't just hire, the local accountant or the lawyer their buddy recommended. They deliberately assemble a dedicated team of top-tier legal, financial, and tax advisors. And these are specialists who routinely work on complex 9-figure or even 10-figure financial puzzles day in and day out.
Why is that specialization so important?
Because these specialists are crucial. They spot nuances, they identify sophisticated planning opportunities, and they anticipate and mitigate risks that a more generalist advisor might completely miss. They ensure that the complex strategies we've been talking about, the trusts, the entity structuring, the tax planning, are properly designed, correctly implemented, and crucially remain compliant over time.
They're paying for elite expertise because the cost of a mistake is huge.
Exactly. The cost of a mistake at their level, a poorly drafted trust, a missed tax election, inadequate asset protection can be absolutely enormous, potentially costing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So they willingly pay top dollar for the best advice because it's actually a massive cost saving in the long run compared to the potential downside of errors. They see it as an investment, not just an expense.
So it's about getting advice from people who are consistently playing at a much higher level than you currently are. People who have seen and solved much more complex scenarios. What's the actionable takeaway for our listener here? Because hire a team of A players sounds, really expensive.
It can be if you try to replicate their full team structure, but you don't need to hire a full-time private attorney or establish your own family office staff right away. The principle, though, is scalable. Be incredibly intentional about your network and your core advisors. Okay, for deal flow and networking, maybe buy just one seat in a carefully curated group. This could be a local angel investment group focused on your industry, a CEO peer advisory forum like Vistage or YPO if you run a business, or maybe a private investor club that brings together like-minded, successful individuals who are a few steps ahead of you. Just being in that room consistently will expose you to higher quality thinking and potential opportunities.
Okay, one focus group for network and deal flow. What about philanthropy?
For philanthropy, maybe make one focused philanthropic pledge, it doesn't have to be huge, to a cause that genuinely aligns with your industry, your values, or your community, and then actually get involved. Join a committee, attend events. This will connect you with a passionate network of people who share those interests.
Makes sense. And for the core professional advisors.
And this is crucial. For your core advisors, your main lawyer, your primary CPA, maybe your financial planner, make a conscious effort to hire professionals who consistently serve clients significantly wealthier than yourself.
Why is that so important?
Because it ensures they're already accustomed to navigating more complex financial landscapes. They already understand and implement the advanced strategies we're discussing. They can bring that higher level perspective and proactive planning to your situation, even if you're not their single wealthiest client. They're already playing the game at the level you aspire to reach, so they can guide you more effectively.
That's fantastic practical advice. It's about intentionally surrounding yourself with the right expertise and the right peer group to elevate your entire financial game and help you anticipate challenges before they happen. Point 7. Case studies. How 5 American icons actually structure things. Okay, we spent a lot of time digging into the principles, the mindsets, the tools, the strategies. Now let's try to connect the dots and see how these concepts actually play out in the real world with some of these iconic figures. We'll draw from publicly documented elements, of course, to highlight the lessons you might be able to apply. Let's start with Elon Musk. His pattern seems crystal clear: radical entity separation and very selective, very high stakes personal leverage.
Absolutely. When you look at Musk, the fact that Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and X-Corp are all strictly distinct legal entities isn't just an organizational choice. It's a critical legal and financial firewall strategy, as we discussed. This setup allows him to attract vastly different types of investors and capital for each venture.
How so?
Well, think about it. Public equity markets for Tesla, specialized venture capital, government contracts, maybe sovereign wealth funds for SpaceX, very deep-pocketed, patient tech investors for something like Neuralink. Each entity has a structure optimized for its unique business model, risk profile, and capital needs.
Right. And the Twitter acquisition.
The Twitter deal, with that complex X-holdings scaffolding structure he created, that was a masterclass in using multiple layered entities to manage the massive legal liabilities involved in such a huge takeover, integrate different funding sources, equity, debt, and ultimately consolidate control under a new private parent company, keeping it separate from his other major ventures.
And then there's his use of personal leverage, pledging those Tesla shares for loans. High stakes, as you said, but clearly a deliberate liquidity tactic that avoids immediate taxes.
Indeed. It's a way to get cash without selling stock and triggering potentially billions in capital gains tax. But as we noted, it carries that inherent risk of margin calls if the underlying asset, the Tesla stock, significantly depreciates. It's a high-wire act, absolutely, but one that allows him to maintain his ownership stake and defer taxes, which is clearly a priority for him.
So pulling it together for our listener, what are the key lessons from Musk's approach?
Lesson 1. Separate legal entities, LLCs or corporations, for each distinct venture are absolutely essential to protect assets and attract the right kind of capital for each one. Don't commingle. Lesson 2. If you ever borrow heavily against your core assets, especially a concentrated position, manage that margin risk incredibly carefully. Understand your downside. And lesson 3. Be willing to consider re-jurisdictional moves, changing your company's state of incorporation, like Tesla did, moving its incorporation from Delaware to Texas, if a different state's legal or regulatory environment seems more favorable to your long-term strategic plan. Don't assume you're stuck where you started.
Okay, next up, Jeff Bezos. We've touched on him quite a bit already because he exemplifies so many of these strategies. But what's the overall pattern here that really stands out when we look at his total wealth structure and approach?
Bezos' pattern really involves a meticulous separation of his personal holdings and passions from his core public company, Amazon, operating key aspects through a professional family office structure, Bezos Expeditions, and employing very strategic jurisdictional optimization for tax efficiency and potentially legal reasons. It seems to be all about long-term control, careful stewardship of different asset types, and maximizing after-tax wealth.
So Bezos Expeditions acts as that central command center, his family office, listing his personal investments like Blue Origin or that 10,000-year clock. And the Washington Post, a significant but non-core asset relative to Amazon, is held completely outside Amazon under Nash Holdings, LLC. That separation wasn't just a whim, right? It was a strategic choice.
Absolutely strategic. Holding WAPO separately is a classic example of putting a non-core but significant, perhaps reputationally sensitive, trophy asset into its own standalone entity. It keeps it ring-fenced from the operations, liabilities, and quarterly pressures of his main public company, Amazon. This separation ensures, for example, that WAPO's journalistic mission isn't perceived as being directly tied to Amazon's corporate interests or bottom line.
Right. Maintains independence, or at least the appearance of it. And his philanthropy, the Earth Fund, the Day One Fund.
As we discussed, those operate as highly focused platforms. They allow him to deploy massive resources towards causes like climate change and early education, generating impact, but also simultaneously building relationships and expanding his influence in those critical global arenas. They're structured more like operating initiatives than just passive check writing.
And, of course, the move we keep coming back to. Changing his personal residency to Florida. Primarily for tax reasons, it seems.
That perfectly highlights the point. That location strategy, carefully considering state tax laws, court systems, maybe even banking regulations, matters significantly for long-term wealth preservation. Florida's lack of a state income tax means Bezos' substantial income from investments, dividends, and potential future stock sales won't be subject to state-level taxation there, potentially saving him hundreds of millions, if not billions, over his lifetime, compared to staying in Washington state with its new capital gains tax. It was a calculated, incredibly impactful financial move.
So, distilling the lessons from Bezos for our listener.
Lesson 1. Consider putting significant non-core or trophy assets, especially those with unique operational or reputational aspects, into their own standalone entities, separate from your main operating business. Lesson 2. Treat major philanthropy strategically as a focused platform for driving impact, but also potentially for building valuable relationships and influence, not just as passive donations. And Lesson 3. Understand that location strategy, especially regarding state tax residency and the legal environment for your entities, like Delaware versus Wyoming versus your home state, matters significantly for your overall long-term financial plan. Pay attention to jurisdiction.
Oprah Winfrey, a true icon, built an empire largely on her personal brand and connection with her audience. Her strategy, particularly around intellectual property, is absolutely fascinating. It really showcases how a personal brand itself can be turned into a financial fortress.
Oprah's pattern is really the textbook example for anyone whose business value is deeply tied to their personal brand, their content, or their unique intellectual property. Her strategy boils down to owning the IP in a dedicated entity, licensing it strategically everywhere, and often structuring deals to get equity upside from partners who leverage her brand rather than just taking fees. Her brand is the core asset.
She has Harpo Inc., which famously and aggressively defends her Oprah name and O branding, and then OW Licensing manages her publicity rights and other licensing deals. This goes way beyond just owning the trademark. It's about actively controlling and monetizing it, right?
Absolutely. That's her IP fortress. She meticulously registers, protects, and defends her valuable brand assets globally, ensuring she retains full ownership and control while maximizing their value through carefully structured licensing agreements. And her strategy with OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, is a great example of leveraging that brand for equity.
How did that work?
Instead of just licensing her name or content to Discovery Communications for a flat fee, OWN started as a joint venture. She contributed her powerful brand, her content library, her audience connection, essentially, her unique IP and distribution power, and received a significant equity stake in the venture. Over time, as Discovery increased its ownership stake, she received valuable Discovery equity in exchange, allowing her to participate in the long-term upside value creation of the network, rather than just being a paid licensor.
So she bet on herself and her brand's ability to drive value and took equity instead of just cash.
Exactly. It aligns incentives and gives her skin in the game with her partners. And she's also shown she's not afraid to rebalance her portfolio of brand affiliations, like when she decided to step down from the board of Weight Watchers and donate her remaining shares.
Right, that made news. Why did she do that?
That seemed like a strategic governance move, and perhaps an optics decision, to align her public stance more clearly with the evolving conversations around new obesity drugs and the broader wellness landscape she covers in her content. It shows a willingness to pivot and optimize her brand associations based on evolving personal views, market trends, and potential reputational risks.
So the key lessons from Oprah for our listeners, especially those with strong personal brands or valuable content.
Lesson 1. Park your valuable trademarks, copyrights, patents, and content libraries in a separate, dedicated IP LLC, and then formally license those assets back to your operating business or third parties for a fee or royalty. Build that IP fortress. Lesson 2. When your brand, your reputation, or your distribution power are critical to a partnership, try to negotiate for equity or profit participation, a joint venture, rather than just accepting a flat licensing fee. Aim for upside. And Lesson 3. Periodically review and rebalance your brand affiliations and endorsements to ensure they still align with your core mission, values, and manage any potential reputational risks. Your personal brand, if you have one, is arguably your ultimate, most valuable asset. Protect it and leverage it wisely.
Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
The Oracle of Omaha, the ultimate long-term value investor. What's his specific blueprint, the pattern we see in how Berkshire Hathaway's incredible wealth was built and is sustained?
Buffett's pattern is really a masterpiece of deliberate corporate structure combined with a disciplined investment philosophy. You see 4 key elements consistently. First, a permanent holding company structure, Berkshire Hathaway itself. Second, highly decentralized operations within the subsidiary companies. Third, extremely centralized capital allocation decisions made at the parent level. And fourth, leveraging that unique insurance float as a durable, incredibly low-cost source of funding for investments. Plus, you see a very systematic approach to his massive philanthropy.
Okay, so Berkshire Hathaway is that quintessential holding company, owning dozens of subsidiary businesses, GEICO, BNSF Railway, et cetera, which operate largely autonomously, as you said.
Yeah.
But the big money decisions, where the capital goes, that's decided right at the top by Buffett and his team.
That's the genius of the model, in my view. The operators, the experts in running railways or selling insurance or making candy, they get the freedom to run their businesses without bureaucratic interference from headquarters. Meanwhile, Buffett and his core team focus on what they do best, allocating the capital generated by all those diverse businesses to where they believe it will generate the best long-term risk-adjusted returns for the overall enterprise. They're playing capital allocation chess across the entire portfolio.
And that insurance float, the premiums collected before claims are paid out. That's the secret sauce funding a lot of this.
It's a massive, incredibly important part of the secret sauce. That float, generated primarily by their large insurance operations like GEICO and National Indemnity, provides Berkshire with a consistent, enormous pool of capital that historically has cost them very little, or sometimes even less than nothing, if underwriting results are profitable. It's essentially free or near-free money that Berkshire can then invest patiently, long-term, in stocks, bonds, or acquiring entire companies. This patient, long-term deployment of low-cost float is a key structural advantage that has fueled Berkshire's incredible compounding for decades. It's hard for competitors to replicate.
And his philanthropy. He's pledged to give away almost all of his wealth, primarily through donations of Berkshire stock to the Gates Foundation and other charities. How is that structured?
It's very systematic. He makes pre-committed annual donations of a set number of Berkshire Hathaway shares. This removes the annual decision friction, provides clarity to the recipient foundations, and is highly tax efficient for his estate planning. He's essentially built the massive giving program into the core structure of his long-term wealth transfer plan. Very organized, very deliberate.
So pulling out the lessons from Buffett for our listener.
Lesson 1. Consider making your parent holding company the central capital allocator for your own group of assets or businesses, while giving your operators or property managers, etc., significant autonomy in their day-to-day execution. Separate strategy from operations. Lesson 2. Actively seek or build durable cash engines within your own business or investments, things like subscription models, long-term contracts, retainer agreements, or other sources that generate consistent, predictable, investable capital, your own version of float, that you can then strategically deploy. Lesson 3. Systematize your own charitable giving, perhaps through a structure like a donor-advised fund, DAF, for clarity, consistency, and potential tax efficiency, even if it's on a much smaller scale.
And finally, let's talk about Donald Brent. His approach to real estate through the Irvine Company is legendary, especially in California, but perhaps less publicly discussed in terms of strategy than some of the other figures we've covered. What's his specific pattern? What can we learn from him?
Brent's pattern is arguably one of the purest examples of concentrated quality and extreme patience in the entire world of wealth building. His approach is almost singular. Sole ownership of the Irvine Company, since he bought out all other shareholders in 1996, combined with extreme multi-decade patience in developing, building, and holding massive portfolios of trophy-grade real estate, primarily concentrated in supply-constrained markets in Orange County, California. It's a masterclass in long-term compounding through focusing on irreplaceable real assets.
He owns an absolutely enormous portfolio. You mentioned hundreds of office buildings, thousands upon thousands of apartment units, major retail centers, and the key is nearly all of it is held for the very long term rather than being constantly bought and sold or flipped for quick profits.
Exactly. That's the power of compounding by not selling high-quality assets in prime locations. His core philosophy seems to emphasize long-term ownership and meticulous operations. They don't just build and sell, they build, own, and manage for decades, constantly reinvesting to improve the assets and maintain their quality, rather than churning the portfolio.
And they manage it all themselves.
Largely, yes. They manage nearly everything in-house, from land entitlement and community planning to architectural design, construction, property management, leasing, even landscaping. This gives them incredible control over the quality of the product, the tenant experience, and ultimately the long-term value creation. This deep operational control allows them to maximize net operating income and long-term appreciation because they aren't constantly paying transaction costs like brokerage fees and closing costs, or triggering capital gains taxes from frequent selling. It's an almost singular focus on developing and holding high-quality long-term assets in a market they know intimately.
So the lessons for our listener from Donald Brenn's approach, even if they're investing on a much smaller scale.
Lesson 1. Focus on buying the best-in-class assets you can afford, ideally in locations with strong long-term fundamentals, like those supply constraints, and then focus on improving and managing them well, rather than constantly tuning your portfolio looking for the next hot thing. Patience pays. Lesson 2. Use leverage conservatively, ensuring your properties generate more than enough cash flow to comfortably cover debt service. Lesson 3. Prioritize tenant quality and long-term relationships. Happy, stable tenants are key to consistent income. And lesson 4, maintain high standards for property management, whether you do it in-house or hire a third party. Good operations are critical for preserving and enhancing asset value over the long haul. It's all about patience, quality, deep market knowledge, and operational control. 8. Your semi-rich playbook, practical steps you can take.
Okay, wow. We've covered a ton of ground today, diving really deep into the playbooks of these billionaires, Musk, Bezos, Oprah, Buffett, Bren. It's fascinating stuff. But now, for the most important part, can you really do this? Can you, our listener, sitting maybe with a net worth between $1 and $10 million, actually implement these kinds of sophisticated strategies without having, $100 million or a team of lawyers on retainer?
Yes. Absolutely, yes. Maybe not the exact same scale or complexity, obviously, but the core principles are highly adaptable. You can definitely implement scaled-down versions. For example, you might be thinking, how can I possibly build a family office like Bezos Expeditions without having $100 million?
Yeah, that sounds completely out of reach.
Well, you can build what we might call a minimum viable family office. It's about adopting the structure and discipline, not necessarily the huge staff. Start with creating your holding company, that central hub we discussed. Then hire a really good, dedicated bookkeeper, someone meticulous who keeps your financial records clean and provides accurate, timely reports. This is non-negotiable.
Okay, holdco and a good bookkeeper. What else?
Engage a part-time or fractional CFO, or at least a highly specialized CPA, someone who can provide strategic financial oversight, help with budgeting and forecasting across your entities, and crucially, handle that proactive tax planning we talked about. Get solid outside legal counsel experienced in business formation and asset protection to set up your entities correctly and provide ongoing compliance advice.
Right.
And set up a secure digital data room, like a shared cloud folder, with strict permissions to keep all your critical documents organized and accessible. Financial statements, legal agreements, tax returns, insurance policies, trust documents. Finally, and this is key for discipline, hold regular, maybe quarterly investment committee meetings, even if it's just with yourself, your spouse, and maybe one key advisor like your CPA. Review the numbers, discuss strategy, make decisions intentionally. This structured approach, even on a relatively small scale, brings a whole new level of discipline and professionalism to managing your growing wealth.
That actually makes it sound far less intimidating. It's about adopting the principles and the process of a family office, not necessarily hiring a dozen people. But, okay, what about the other potential hurdle? The idea of having a lot of entities. That often overwhelms people. It just sounds like so much paperwork, so much hassle, so many filing fees.
I hear that concern all the time. And yes, it feels like more work up front compared to just having one big, messy LLC for everything. There's definitely some initial paperwork. And yes, there are modest annual filing fees and potentially registered agent fees for each entity, but trust me on this one. It is far, far simpler and exponentially safer in the long run.
Simpler in the long run.
Think of it like preventative maintenance for your financial health, like we said before. It's far easier and cheaper to set these separate entities up cleanly from the start than it is to try and surgically unscramble one giant commingled LLC later if, God forbid, you face a serious lawsuit against one part of your operation, or if you want to sell just one specific asset or business line, or if you decide you want to bring in outside investors or partners for just one particular venture. Trying to untangle that mess later is a legal and accounting nightmare, and potentially impossible without huge cost and risk.
Okay, so preventative medicine. Start clean. How many entities to start?
Simple, but separate from day one, maybe just 3 to begin. Your holding company, Holdco, your main operating company, Octo, for your primary business, and if applicable, your IP company, IPCo, for your valuable intellectual property. Then, as you acquire more significant assets like rental properties, you add PropCo 1 LLC, PropCo 2 LLC for each new property. The peace of mind, the asset protection, the clarity, and the future flexibility you gain are immeasurable compared to the relatively minimal ongoing effort and cost of maintaining separate entities.
That's a really helpful way to frame it. Easier and safer in the long run. Okay, and then the big question that always comes up when talking about sophisticated structures. When do I need to think about going offshore, setting up entities in the Caymans or Nevis or somewhere like that? Is that something the semi-rich should even be considering?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of hype and sometimes misinformation around offshore structures. Here's the reality for most semi-rich Americans. You generally only need to seriously consider using offshore entities when there are very clear, compelling, and fully compliant legal or business reasons for doing so.
Like what kind of reasons?
This might relate to structuring specific types of international investment funds, accommodating a predominantly international investor base for your business, or taking advantage of very particular tax treaty benefits that might apply to your unique cross-border situation. It's usually driven by specific international business needs, not just a desire for secrecy or dodging U.S. taxes, which is illegal and dangerous.
So, for most people listening, focus mainly on U.S. assets and business.
For probably 90% or more of the practical benefits we've discussed today, robust privacy, strong asset protection against lawsuits, significant tax efficiency through things like QSBS or Hand 31's strategic state selection within the U.S., like using Delaware or Wyoming LLCs, as we discussed, combined with proper domestic trust planning, like revocable trusts, ILETs, maybe asset protection trusts, will absolutely suffice. You likely don't need the added complexity, the significant additional legal and compliance costs, and the increased scrutiny that often comes with offshore structures, unless there's a very clear, quantifiable, and legitimate business or investment reason driving it. Don't overcomplicate things unnecessarily. Focus on mastering the powerful tools available right here at home first.
Okay, so no need to book that flight to the Cayman Islands just yet to meet with your lawyer.
Huh.
Not unless it's purely for vacation, funded by your appropriately sized passion asset allocation, of course. Outro. All right, what an incredible deep dive. What we've really seen today, looking across these billionaires from such diverse industries, tech, retail, media, investing, real estate, is this remarkably common spine of strategic wealth management principles underlying their success. It's not just about making more money, although obviously that's part of it. It's maybe even more critically about not leaking what you already earn and build. It's about building that robust, resilient framework for your wealth that actively prevents erosion from taxes, lawsuits, and mistakes. Structure truly does seem to be just pure hustle when it comes to scaling and preserving a significant fortune over the long haul.
That's the powerful insight, isn't it? It's about deliberately building that framework, that fortress that actively prevents wealth erosion, that allows the magic of compounding to really work for you over decades, protected from those catastrophic leaks.
So for you, our listener, we want to leave you with 3 concrete, actionable steps. Things you could potentially start working on in the next 90 days to begin implementing these powerful, ultra-rich strategies scaled down appropriately for your reality, putting this knowledge into immediate action.
Okay, step 1, form your hub. Go ahead and create your central holding company, LLC. If you're unsure about which state is best for your specific situation, maybe Delaware, maybe Wyoming, maybe even your home state, depending on the circumstances, consult with an attorney who really specializes in asset protection and business formation for advice tailored to you, but get that holdco set up. Then, crucially, begin the process of formally transferring the ownership of your existing business interests, your OpCo shares membership, and your valuable intellectual property into your IPSO, so they are legally owned by the holdco. This sets that foundational parent-child architecture for everything else you build.
Okay, form the hub and start organizing the kids underneath it. Step 2.
Second, conduct a liability audit. Take a really honest, hard look at all your existing assets, especially those that carry inherent liability risk. If you own rental properties, double-check that each one is held in its own separate LLC. Please, don't commingle them in one LLC or hold them in your personal name. And then immediately call your insurance agent and either add or significantly increase your personal umbrella liability coverage. This is often remarkably affordable insurance, maybe a few $100s a year for an extra $1 million or $2 million in coverage, but it provides incredibly robust personal protection against those unexpected, potentially ruinous lawsuits that could otherwise devastate your personal fortune. Don't wait for a problem to happen. Proactively shield yourself now.
Get the structure right, get the insurance right, good advice. And the third step.
And third, map your tax plan proactively. Schedule a dedicated meeting, maybe 2 focused hours, specifically for strategic tax planning with your certified public accountant. And again, Ideally, find a CPA who routinely serves clients wealthier and more complex than yourself. Use that meeting to specifically discuss the potential applicability of tax-efficient strategies like QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. For any C-Corp businesses you own or might start, the mechanics and timelines for N31 exchanges if you own investment real estate, and maybe opportunity zones if you have capital gains to reinvest, looking ahead over the next 12 to 24 months. The key is, don't wait until you're already in the middle of selling something to think about these tax strategies. Proactive planning and structuring from the outset is absolutely essential to maximizing your ability to legally retain more of your wealth.
Form the hub, audit liability and insurance, map the tax plan proactively. Those are 3 huge, concrete steps. And remember, these strategies we've discussed today, they aren't just theoretical concepts reserved for the ultra-wealthy, locked away behind some secret billionaire code. This is a proven playbook, adapted for your reality, whether you're at $1 million, $5 million, or $10 million in net worth. Starting with these seemingly small, strategic structural moves today can lead to truly